Hey everybody, Tony D. Little Jones asleep on the couch. I'm in my jammies, but I had to do a video about this because it's kind of exciting. This is Dictor Van Doomcock, supervillain, mad scientist, pop culture critic. He's got a great channel, Overlord DVD. Check it out if you can. Well, he just did a video which I watched called "This is what Hollywood fears the most. Here's how you fight back." So definitely check that out. And the reason I'm excited about it is now understand that Doomcock, he does a whole shtick where he's a supervillain, but he actually does a lot of cool research and has people in the industry feeding him information. So he has confirmed what I speculated in Hollywoke, another novel, which was the streaming services may be damaging Hollywood. Now, in my theory, they're going to bankrupt studios, and here's why. And this isn't quite what he said. What he said was his insiders are saying that they're losing money on the stream, and he did a calculation where he thinks they're losing money, and I think that's could be right. But here's my take on it. Here's sort of an added thing. The studios make movies, and according to Doomcock, the projections are that they're going to have to downsize everything. So a movie that normally would cost them over $100 million will have to be like $80 million. Instead of spending $50 million on it, they're going to have to spend like half that. Best case scenario, which these days is going to hurt them. Although they do overspend quite a bit. So maybe it might help them in the short term. Or in the long term, because, people will have to be more frugal and think a little more. But here's why I think the whole system is on the verge of collapsing. So when Netflix came out, I guess that's probably the first streaming service, right? Or the first one everybody knew, at least. When Netflix first came out, it was like having a Blockbuster in your computer. Sorry, I'm dating myself. Blockbuster was the place where you could rent movies, and Netflix was kind of like that, except instead of renting individual movies, of course, you just pay a cheap fee and you could stream whatever movies they had. Now, this had been a service at Xfinity, but their movies, for the most part, weren't so hot, right? They'd have a ton of crappy movies, and then, in my view, and then a bunch of the movies that were in the pipeline anyway that you were paying for. With Netflix, they had mostly not great movies, but a few good ones, and then, in my view, and then a ton of TV shows, including The Office, which everybody was streaming at the time, and a bunch of other good shows. But then, of course, all these studios said, why aren't we getting that revenue? Netflix is creaming us here. They're making money hand over fist. We should be making that money. Let's kill these licensing deals and do our own streaming service. So that's what they've all started doing, right? And as more and more of these streaming services were created, Netflix knew they were losing a bunch of the stuff that they had licensed or paid for, whatever the deals they made. I don't have any inside track. Again, this is all my opinion based on my experience, such that it is. But now Netflix gets drained of content to a certain extent. So all these studios and networks, they're all vying, realizing that their libraries is where all the money is. But these guys have kind of forgotten their roots, because ultimately the roots of television networks were their libraries. But it wasn't like a library like as you know it now on the internet, where you go to, say, the Paramount streaming service and you have access to a bunch of the Paramount shows, or you get Nick at Night and you have access to all the old shows. What a network TV used to be, and still kind of is today, was, you had the ABC shows, and they would run the old ABC shows in the daytime, at night, on the weekends, when, they just needed to fill up time. They would run that for their affiliates. Now that whole model is starting to fall apart, not because the library of content didn't work, but because no one's really watching TV now. Now TV isn't what it used to be. See, without the internet, television was, you had to sit and wait for your TV show to come on. That's why you had TV Guide. I'm doing this explanation for the kids out there. So you had the TV Guide, your show came on at 8, you had to watch it at 8. There's no other choice until they invented VCRs that everybody could afford, which were the videotapes, or DVRs, which they still have now, and now they have TiVos in just about every TV. You don't even have to buy one. It comes with your cable service sometimes. At least it does with Comcast. So you have the ability and the tremendous amount of content, right? And all you want now is, rather than to view one network or competing networks, you just want the best streaming service. If a streaming service has all your shows, what do you need cable TV for? That's why a lot of people are just unplugging. If you only watch one or two shows, then you're only going to stream the shows you want to watch, and then F everything else, right? Amazon Prime, you can actually buy an individual episode. I can watch Rick and Morty because they don't have the rights to Rick and Morty, but they'll sell them to you for $1.99. You get to watch one of the episodes. When you think about it, it's not a bad deal, right? Rather than pay tens of dollars every month for a streaming service you may or may not watch, if you only watch Rick and Morty, if that's like your one show, it's totally worth it for you to buy the season and binge watch it and be done. Or download it into your iPad or whatever so you can watch it whenever you want. What Doomcock is suggesting is to get a one of these temporary credit cards, basically a gift card that acts like a credit card. Buy a streaming service with the money on the card for a month, binge what you want, and because in his view people forget their streaming service and they just keep paying for it, which is true a lot, and the trick is they also offer it to you for free for 3 months and put it on but you need your credit card, and then of course at the end of that time they start charging you, and by that time you've either forgotten about it or you're like, well, it's only $10, let me, I still watch something, so let me watch it. But what's going to happen, and we could see down the road that there's going to be an economic crisis, and I'm not going to go into the politics of that. They just passed the infrastructure deal. So save your money, folks. Don't waste your money. And one of the first things you're going to cut, streaming service. Why the hell would you need a streaming service if you got YouTube for free? Why the hell would you need a streaming service even without YouTube? There are plenty of other platforms. Some of the stuff is, there's old TV shows on Bitchute. There's a guy, all he does is he just transfers old TV shows onto his Bitchute channel. If you happen to be a fan of those shows, or even if you're not, you might just go, well, this is free. This is free. I can't afford anything. I might as well watch this. So who is going to watch these streaming services once they're caught up to what they wanted to watch? The only thing they'll be interested after a while. Like if you get Disney Plus, in my view, this is just my opinion. Once you've burned through all the Marvel movies and the various shows you like, unless you're like a total Disney head, you're going to burn through it in, I don't know, maybe a month, too. It depends on your age and how much time you got. If you're really into Disney, sure, it might take you a while, but you'll burn through it eventually. Then what? You're paying for this service, you never watch it. It's a better deal to just buy it for a month and then jump ship. because some of these services come free anyway, right? I've got HBO Max for free. It came with my iPhone. Now, at some point, they're probably going to start charging me, in which case I'll jettison that like that. But people will start doing that because money's going to get tight, and if you only watch one or two shows on a streaming service, and they're going to raise the price of the streaming service because they're going to have to. The only way to save these streaming services, and this is the next step, this is not what I talked about in Hollywoke, is they're going to have to put the commercials back on. They're going to have to go back to being networks, except instead of networks on a television set, it's going to be networks on a website. They're going to have a website, it's going to have commercials, but everything will be free, or mostly free. You know, they'll have different levels of service that you can purchase if you want. So if you want to watch it commercial free, you'd pay a fee. If you want to see things early, you pay a fee. If you only want to see the new stuff, you pay a fee. Everything else probably going to end up being free, because then the idea will be just like the same idea with television. You watch the commercials in order to pay for the show. That's the way television worked. The money was all in the sponsors. And you would get sponsors, they would sponsor the show, and they'd keep doing it until the sponsors said, hey, your ratings suck. I'm not gonna pay for this anymore. Instead of ratings, it'll be clicks. It'll be views. Just like on YouTube. If you get enough views on a show, enough people watch it, then voila, you got a sponsor. The sponsor sponsors it, you keep making the show, you keep making money. But the question is, what does that model look like? Because understand, with television, it was a more captive audience. We only had 3 major networks when I was a kid. CBS, NBC, and ABC. That was it. The rest of the channels were the rerun channels, we'd call them. We had like 3 or 4 of them, and we had a PBS channel, and channels that were essentially all reruns. All reruns. That's where I would watch old Star Treks and whatnot. Those had almost no original programming. They were just there for the reruns. Only the networks could afford to make new shows. And most of their programming was reruns too, because they couldn't afford to make new shows 24/7. There will be a content glut at some point, and these studios will have to realize they can't keep people enraptured for 24/7. You look at CNN, right? When CNN first launched, it was hard news. It was all about the news for a while. And then they quickly realized there's not enough news in a 24-hour cycle to keep people's attention. The only time people's attention were kept when there was a disaster. And then, yeah, CNN would be 24/7 and everybody would watch it because, hey, we're in the middle of a disaster, or we're in the middle of a war or a bombing or whatever. But during normal time, yeah, people would watch the headline news and then go back to whatever the hell they're doing. They're not going to watch news at 2 p.m. in the afternoon when they're at work, or 9:15 in the morning when they're rushing to work, or even 10 o'clock at night when they're done with the news and they want to watch something fun. So CNN changed its model up, and now they do news at certain times, and sometimes they'll go 24 hours, but a lot of times they won't, and even that model's just starting to fall apart anyway because no one's watching news. And CNN has other problems in my view. But the point is, the streaming services, the whole point was Netflix was super cheap and had a ton of stuff. So it was totally worth having a Netflix account. Now, is it worth having a Netflix account for, the original woke programming they're putting out, and You know, a lot of it's foreign stuff. They bought up a ton of foreign movies, and some of them are great. Don't get me wrong. Some of that Netflix stuff's really cool, but the foreign stuff is really cool. Most of the stuff that's produced domestically is so woke. It just it just makes my head go. And people just don't like that stuff. They don't like to be preached to. The only people who like that stuff are the people on Twitter, and those people don't watch because the purpose of being woke is not to watch or do anything. It's just to get the virtue points. They go on Twitter, they say, hey, I support this wonderful woke show. And they got what they wanted out of it. They wanted validation from total strangers on the internet. They get that. There's no point in watching the show. They might still watch it. Unlikely. Unlikely. Because they're too busy being on Twitter. That's their jam. Not watching TV shows. The kind of people who watch TV, at least in my day, man, I sound old saying that, were people who, they go to work, and then 5 p.m. comes, they come home, they're watching dinner, or they're eating dinner, and they're going to watch something while they eat dinner, maybe, you know, unless they got a family, and maybe there's more talking involved, and they don't want to do that during family time, and then they go after dinner to digest and relax and watch something on TV. And there were certain programs for that time, right? You don't want to necessarily watch something that's super dense during that time, right? You're kind of relaxing. You want to be entertained. That's why sitcoms were very popular, because they were kind of brainless. They'd give you a laugh. They were short. If they sucked, they were over. If you know, you could always change the channel, find a different one. You wanted to just have a laugh and forget your troubles. You know, with stuff like Star Trek, that kind of came later. It's a little more fantastical. Yeah, people still like that too, but mostly they kind of want to laugh. And the problem with the woke stuff is it's not funny. It's never funny. It's the death of comedy. It's anti-comedy, really. So, what are these streaming services and these studios going to do? Well, the most obvious thing is they're going to cut. And when I say cut, they're going to cut major divisions. Forget about Marvel Comics. There's no way they're going to waste money on that when Disney really tries to, you know, cut back on all its stuff. What's the point? They could make more money licensing the comics out, let somebody else have the headache, and make the money. And these studios have tons of assets. They pay a ton of money, you know, especially when it's a union gig. They overpay for everything. And that's going to go away at a dodo. You know, they're going to start looking to go to foreign countries and even other states in the United States, willing to give them deals, willing to give them crew that they don't have to pay union wages to, willing to, you know, they'll always grease the palms of the stars if any of them have any pull. The problem is celebrities are atomizing too. There's almost, you know, when there was a celebrity back in the day, everybody knew who they were because there was only so many movies, so much TV. They tend to be funneled through the same channels, and you knew who they were. Everybody knew who Johnny Carson was. Everybody knew who Bob Hope was. You know, Johnny Carson, the host of The Tonight Show, didn't have a lot of competition. Pretty much everybody watched The Tonight Show. Now, there's late night shows that beat the band. Who's the king? Doesn't really matter. There's too many of them. The audience is split. So, it doesn't matter who these guys interview. You know, you can only get so much juice out of a celebrity now. Now it's the celebrities desperate going on each and every show. And since these studios are competing with each other, they have competing celebrities. And their exposure, they control that, at least on their own networks and shows. So they're going to truncate that to the celebrities they need to promote in order to promote their big movies and big TV shows. And they're going to ignore just about everybody else. You know, depending on who it was. Letterman back in the day would have interesting guests because he'd tend to open it up a little bit to some weirdos and, interesting people that weren't really connected to anything, like Harvey Peacock when he brought him on. Conan O'Brien did it a little bit too, like when he had Hunter S. Thompson on. But the talk show's going away because television's done. Streaming is where it's at. So the question is, what kind of show can you watch on a streaming app? Well, you got Real Time with Bill Maher is kind of the new talk show format. But, are you going to be able to get, the exposure there like the Tonight Show used to get? No way. No freaking way. You had a united sort of audience then. Now it's so disparate. So these streaming services are becoming like radio. Okay? And understand that radio was the same way. There was a ton of money in radio when it first came out. When radio was new, everything was on radio. They had narrative shows and cooking shows and music and all sorts of things. But when TV came in, then radio wasn't as useful. Stuff migrated to TV because there was a visual element to it. As people got TVs, TV became more and more important. Radio became less and less important until now it's just a thing you put on in a car. Maybe you listen to it in your laptop while you're working. So the same thing has happened with television. It's going away. Same thing is happening with movies. There's no point anymore. Why go to a movie and pay all that money for expensive snacks, for uncomfortable seats, to sit around people you don't like, who make too much noise, or in this era, who may be sick and you don't want to get sick? So now you might as well stay home. Flat screen TVs are big and plentiful and cheap as hell. You can have a great time. Now, one of the things Doomcock was saying about the premiere streaming of the movie, $30 to stream a movie, they made money on that, right? Although he thinks they lost money. Here's the key, though. They may have actually made money on that. And the reason I say that is, yes, fewer people probably bought the streaming service, and fewer people paid that $30 than, say, going into the movies, and they lost money on it because a family of four would have paid less. But the question is, did the studio make more money? Because understand, they made all that $30. Now, that's not all profit, but they get to make it all. Nobody else gets it. The theaters, it's different. They have to deal with the theaters and split the profit. I don't know how this. Pretty sure the split is. I think the movie theater pays a fee. They get the movie, and then they split the ticket sales after a point, something like that. So, what they're trying to transition to is a situation where they can broadcast the movie on their own platform and make all the money and cut the movie theaters out. That's what they think, and it probably will eventually happen. But the problem is there's too much competition. Every studio is going to have a streaming service, every single one. So what encourages me to get one streaming service over another? Well, content, but also the price. So their prices have got to come down. HBO Max right now, although it has a terrible search function, it's great because they're giving it away a lot of times. It comes with all sorts of things right now. Now that may not be true in the future, but if they keep the price very, very low and they undercut Disney, well then a lot of people will say, well, I'm trying to save money, let me get HBO Max. Even if it doesn't have everything I want, it might have enough content that's my one channel I'm going to buy. Or maybe I just buy that for a while and I'll buy Disney as a treat for a short time. Eventually somebody's going to come out with another model where, okay, you can rent our movie over at, say, Disney Plus. Even though you're not a member, you could just see the movie, but it costs you a little more. Right? Costs you a little more. If you're a subscriber, it costs you this amount, it costs you cheaper. But if you're a non-subscriber, it costs you a little more. Maybe it costs you $40, and you're not signed on, or maybe you get a month's worth of the thing free, and so that's how they'll suck you in. They'll get your credit card, or maybe not. I mean, like I said, Amazon Prime already lets you buy stuff just at a pop. That's how I saw the sequel to Train to Busan Peninsula, which is awesome, by the way. So, but this means all the studios are going to have to rethink their models. And I think they're going to crash and burn before they figure that out. A lot of them will, especially the ones with a lot of overhead. Disney. They're going to be in trouble. They're going to be in trouble because, not everybody in this business, is going to have all the union things set in place. That's why the battle with the unions over internet rights and pay was such a big fight. And it will probably be a bigger fight in the future because it's all being sucked into the internet. Every single entertainment thing. It's always going to be through the internet. There's no point to television anymore. In fact, most television is digital now, and it's really the internet. It's just, filtered internet through your cable system. So at some point, all this is collapsing into the internet, and the studios will essentially just be another website you visit. And whether or not they can compete, it's a different world on the internet, right? Because if they're just another website, there's only one website. They need stuff in the real world to draw people in. And, television, they would advertise on other people's networks and lesser networks, their shows to draw them in. That's going to be tougher to do on a streaming service. Why should Disney promote HBO Max, even if they had commercials on their platform, which they don't yet? They might say no if they're the big dog. Same thing with Netflix, and what's that going to cost anyway? And is it going to do any good? Because people have all these gadgets in order to shut down ads and avoid commercials. And just like we didn't initially have them on for TV, we eventually got them. We're going to get them for every streaming service too. Somebody will invent something. They'll invent something. To record your whole show. Download your whole show, records it with the commercials, and then you can watch it and zoom through the commercials. That would be one way around it. So, very interesting developments. This is going to impact filmmaking and making TV shows big time. Bigger than the woke stuff, which will eventually just go away because it'll be a dead trend. It's going to change the business model. And it's all going to be about big tech. All going to be about big tech because right now they hold the reins. So there was a time you could post something on a website and people would just find you and it would go viral, and the next thing you know, you got tons of visitors. That doesn't happen anymore because of the control big tech seems to have on the search engines. But even that's changing too. More and more search engines are emerging. It's getting bigger and bigger, while it will allow filmmakers to make their own film, broadcast it on their own website for a fee or whatever. There's still going to be so many different platforms and websites. I think that'll probably be the future, much like what's happening with the Comicsgate guys and comics, doing all the crowdfunding. I think you're going to see more crowdfunded movies where the movie is on a site, a site that you can only have access to if you have the right key. And then you'll pay a fee, and you'll be sent a temporary code where you could download or watch the movie. And that's how, young filmmakers will break in. They'll put together trailers, which they'll put all over social media. And then if you like the movie, you can click, buy it, rent it, essentially, watch it, and enjoy it. So, and TV shows too. I mean, we kind of already have that with YouTube a bit. You know, there are people who do shows. I mean, I'm kind of doing a show, but you know, actual narrative shows. You know, once the people start gearing up their production a little bit, and I've seen people do short shows. You know, you got animators; they're very big on it. But I think you're going to see more. The technology is getting easier and easier for people to do stuff. So I think this is an interesting development. It may break the stranglehold that the studios had on entertainment, and they may come to regret the way they've acted over the years, but not really. Most of the people who are in charge now weren't the people who developed the studio. They just inherited it, and they'll go down in flames, but they'll all have golden parachutes at this stage. Give it 10 years, we'll see where they are, because the money's going out of TV and movies. So very interesting. Check out Doomcock's channel, and check out my Bitchute and Rumble. I'm sure I've got 2 videos over there. Got to spread yourself on all the platforms. That's the future. And oh, by the way, I have a big announcement about the channel, but I'll get into that in another video.